The
He was
wilderness is
innocent and all the rest,
necessary.
and he
Part
thought
4 of
that,
6.
these are my brothers and whatever, but they were envious of the dreams, the prophetic dreams that the Lord was giving Joseph, and then his father gave him the coat of many color. He was favored. That grace upon his life caused person to love him and to show him to be different with him. And we see that after they dug the pit and put him in the pit that didn't quite work. They sold him into slavery. He went into Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife tried a thing, tried to sleep with him. He resisted, he ran away, and she told lies on him. He was sent to prison. He met a baker and all the rest, and the baker didn't quite remember him, but God would strategically put something in place that he would be remembered to interpret a dream. And then he was remembered and he interpreted the dream, and that was it. He moved from strength to strength, and we see that he became second in command and he was the prime minister. And we understand that, difficulty, hardship, um, caught his brothers and his father, and they came looking for help further afield. And when he saw them, he didn't despise them. He didn't hold what they had done to him against them. He, forgave them, and he helped them. I say all of this to say that, we must understand that it can be difficult to forgive those who wrong us, but we must remember that God is love, and to love is of God. Agape love that there is no intent behind it. You're not looking for any repayment or anything. It's true love that comes from God. So we must love. And I often say this to people: love is a must, but relationship is a choice. We must love. We must love, because in, I think it's John 4, verse 7 to 8, it reminds us that God is love and to love is of God. So we must love. We must love. Love is a must, but relationship is a choice. Or close we are to persons, if we are friends with them, it's a choice. It's about fellowship and not friendship. And so we must understand that, it can be difficult to forgive, but we have to ask the Lord to help us to forgive, because we want to be forgiven. The Lord forgive us. And we see in the scripture that it was asked about forgiveness, and the Lord would explain to forgive 70 times 7. Glory be to God. So if we come back to the Israelites in the wilderness, they didn't realize that, the wilderness was a place of sanctification. It was a place of purification. Glory be to God in the highest. And, we must understand that there are times that we have to be still and know that God is God. Psalms 46 verse 10 reminds us that we are to be still and know that God is God. When we're not hearing from God, when it seems still or silent, or there is nothing, we just trust God and know that He is there. Even in the times when we might not hear His response, He might be silent, we're not feeling anything, He is still there. God is still God, He's still present, He's still in the miracle working business, even when we are not getting a response. Because my understanding is that when we are calling upon the Lord and we don't hear from Him, it's a number of things. Either He's testing our faith, or we have to wait until the right Kairos time, that time when the Lord move. It's a divine move of God. Nothing can stop it. Nothing in the heavens or the earth can stop it. Or it's something that is telling us to wait, to be patient, or we are getting into something that isn't our jurisdiction or our business. But God don't go silent for a reason. He goes silent for us to identify that something isn't quite right, and for us to review ourselves and see where we are. But the Israelites, they were ungrateful, they were rebellious, they were stiff-necked, they were difficult to please, in summary. But we see that God still didn't give up on them. God made a promise, and the promise, He stood by the promise. And the Israelites failed to identify, as I said earlier, that they couldn't just leave out of Egypt and go into Canaan. They couldn't just leave out of bondage and go into the promised land, because they had learned a lot of things that they had to unlearn and relearn the new way. They had to come out of that darkness that they had learned in Egypt and come into marvelous light. They had to come out of those behaviors, those patterns, those way of life, and all the rest, and come into newness, come into transformation. And we see that because they couldn't identify that, they didn't realize that their discernment wasn't where it should be, or else they would have realized that they had to go through that place. They had to go to that place, or they had to go through that purification to detox from all those behaviors, to get rid of all those behaviors before they could get into the promised land. And we see that the covenant, the promise that was made unto the Israelites, that it was fulfilled, that it manifested and it come to pass. But what happened is that the Israelites that left out of Egypt did not make it into the promised land. It was their generations that made it into the promised land.